Hi. So last time we talked about innovation and ideation techniques, how to come up with an idea. But actually we usually start with understanding who we want to sell to. So this time we're going to be talking about learning from your customer. I'm going to talk about introduction to customer research, types of survey, and then how you turn that feedback into a direction. And as always, just remember there's much more than I can convey here, so please do your own research and go and speak to an expert one-to-one. So first we start with who your customer is. Often you can get this data just from internal data that you collect from point of sale. So you can find out, first of all, are you selling internally to someone in your company, or are you selling externally? Are you selling to another business, to a customer, to a government? How are you selling? Like, what sales channel are you using? And the basic things like the demographics, so the age, gender, family status, location, income, those sorts of things. So that data is very, very valuable and is also very easy to get. So that should usually be your starting point. And after that, then you need to use a combination of two types of research. So there's quantitative and there's qualitative, or quant and qual. So quantitative relates to the size of something. It's numerical. To analyze the data relies on statistics. And the value of this data is that you can have large sample sizes, which mean you're getting a real cross-section of the population. Qualitative is about the quality of something. And this is really verbatim, it's customer voice. And it relies on you interpreting what the customers are saying. So this is a much more intensive process, but it gives you much more depth. And like I said, you need to use both to really understand your customers. The basic technique for doing customer research is based on Socratic Method. It's not Socratic Method, but it's kind of related. So Socrates had a good starting point. His point was that I know nothing. So a good starting point is to assume you don't know your customer, and then you want to learn everything. But the Socratic Method is about answering a question with another question, or one question should lead to another question. So fundamentally what you usually want to get to is, do you like your idea or your product? But if you come out and ask that question, that's all you'll get is a binary answer, a yes-no answer. So you want to start with really, really high level. Who are you? What do you do? What do you like and dislike? And not about the product, but about their life in general. What drives you? What are your beliefs? What is the best or worst example of a service or a product? And now you start to get more specific into the area that you're talking about. What are the good examples? What are the good characteristics? What are the worst examples? And then finally, you narrow down to, do you like my idea or product? But if you, like I said, if you start with that specific, all you'll get is that specific. You want to be as far away from your product as possible at the start, and each step get closer and closer. So quantitative data particularly can be a little bit dangerous if you don't put it in context and you don't have that deeper understanding of the qualitative side. So if I take a single data point, I can draw any line I want through that, up, down, left, right, whatever. So if I have a few data points, I have a few choices of how I can draw my line still. If I have a lot of data points, actually I still have a lot of choices of how I can draw lines through those data points. And actually if I choose a different set of data, I can draw a completely different conclusion. So generally, if you just take raw data, you can actually make data fit any conclusion you want, which is why it can be a bit dangerous. So you really need it in context, and you really need with that deeper understanding of the qualitative side. Also, when you're looking at customer data, you want to, of course, be looking at the detail, but you also, more than anything, you want to be looking at the change. So the change in variables. If I change one thing, what happens? Or how the customer mindset is changing over time. So if you do a survey at point 1, and you do the same survey 6 months, a year, a week, whatever later, what change has there been? And then why? So there's several different types of survey that you can use to get that data. First of all is your absorbed knowledge. This is what you already know from your life experience or from just someone else's research. That could be scientific papers, that can be government studies, or just internet research. And this gives you a starting point. This is your hypothesis. So as a good scientific method, what you have to do is then prove or disprove your hypothesis. So having that base data is never good enough. You have to validate that hypothesis, and that's why you're using the other survey techniques. But it's okay to start with your assumption as a starting point from that. So one of the most commonly used types of surveys is an impersonal survey. So for example, that can be a syndicated survey, so like J.D. Power quality of car survey that runs in the US. It can be online surveys, so many companies send you satisfaction forms and things like that. Back in when I started doing customer research, we didn't have any clever tools. We were just doing Excel and emails. But now you've got things like SurveyMonkey, which is very, very useful for even private individuals to run surveys. And in the software world, there's A/B testing, which can be quite useful. So A/B testing, for example, is you can change the content of your program or your website or your app or whatever, and see if the customer responds to that. In the physical world, we generally have to run a small survey to actually check that, because we can't change the product quickly. But in the software world, you can change it quickly and find the customer reaction. So, for example, I could ask you now, which logo do you like better, A or B? Which one represents my personal brand? Which one represents my YouTube channel and these videos? Or I could ask you, which do you like better? This kind of PowerPoint slide format with a little talking head, or this other style where mainly I'm talking to you and then showing some data along the side? So whenever you're doing these changes, just like scientific method, you should change one variable at a time. That's quite important. If you change too many things, you have no idea what people are reacting to. So these impersonal surveys are really good, especially for quantitative data, because you can get big sample sizes. So it gives you a real picture of the overall market. And you can quickly and cheaply test ideas. It's usually relatively cheap to do a quantitative, like an email survey or online survey. And with a lot of that numerical data, management in big organizations love numerical data, and you can do quite complex statistical analysis. So there's an analysis called conjoint analysis, where you take several variables and you can pick out trends from those variables and customer reaction in ways that aren't immediately obvious. There are some weaknesses. So if you have these big surveys, the detail can be quite lost in large data. So if I take a customer survey of customers who have new cars, and I ask them, do you like your new car? And they say yes to one car and no to another car. That doesn't necessarily help me by itself, because they might be coming from completely different points. Some people might never have had a car before. Other people might have come from Rolls Royces and Ferraris and things. So their base point for do you like your car is unknown. So you lose a lot of that data in these big numerical surveys. And you don't gain any deeper understanding. So you understand the data points, but because there's no text, there's no questioning following up, you don't know what's behind the customer motivation. You're only hearing the immediate customer voice. I'll explain in a little minute why that's important. So a semi-personal survey can be a good middle ground. So an example of this is a focus group. So in a focus group, you've got 5 or 10 people sitting around a table discussing, and there's a moderator. And from this, you get a little bit of sense of personality from each person, a little bit of sense of background from each person. The moderator is there responding to the group, asking questions and following up, so you can get some more depth into the why, into the background. And the sample sizes tend to be bigger. So, if you have 5 or 10 people in a focus group, you run 10 of those, you can get, 50 or 100 people, which is it's a decent sample size. That gives you confidence that you're representing the whole market. But quite often I've seen these be dominated by one strong personality, or by everyone just agreeing to go along, what's called groupthink, where everyone just agrees to proceed. And so maybe you don't get those strong differing individual opinions. You get kind of one dominant opinion, or one easy direction. And so that really requires an experienced survey moderator to be able to ask those questions and manage the group. So that's where survey agencies are really useful, because they know how to do this. They're very experienced at moderating. And then personal surveys are surveys that we can do very easily ourselves. This is, for example, one-on-one surveys. So I interview you, I ask you what you think, or just observing someone. So going somewhere where you can see someone interacting with a product, but maybe they're not aware that you're doing that. And again, this is something that's relatively easy with IT, so they can watch what you're doing with a program. And from this, you can get a lot more detail and background. So you can really deeply understand the customer, their motivation, their mentality. And by constantly using that Socratic method, the why, you can go to unexpected places. But you need to have a really experienced interviewer to use that method correctly, to ask the right questions, to go down the right paths. To not ask closed questions, to always ask open questions. And this only works for very, very small numbers of people, because you would spend your entire life just asking customers if you wanted a big sample size. It's not practical. So it's very difficult to get a snapshot of the whole market. So that's why you need to use a balance of the different types of survey methodologies. So once you've got that information, how do you use that information? I was in a survey once, and there was this exact situation. So we asked the customers, what do you like? And they said, I like my current car. Okay, a little bit later on in the survey. So what do you really want? I want to spend less on fuel and taxation in the future, and also maybe I want to be kinder to the environment. And so then later on in the survey, asked, okay, so what do you want in future? And they said, just my current car, but more economical. And then later on, showed them a completely different car, nothing like their current car. And they go, oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. And the point is, the customers don't know what they want. They know maybe what they like today and what they find difficult today, but they have no vision. You're the one who's supposed to come with the vision, and you can only build that vision based on, not on the surface what they say, but their deep motivation. So there's this very famous quote that Henry Ford said, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Apparently he never actually said this, but the point is that Henry Ford's great leap was bringing cars to the mass market, making them cheap enough that normal people could afford. Before then, they'd been super luxury products. And those normal people had been having horses. So you ask them what they want, I just want a horse. They never dreamed they could own cars, and then he made them affordable. So that's your job as the product manager, as the product owner. You have to try and figure out what those dreams are, figure out what people really want, and then turn that into a product or a service. So to do that, when you're asking all these questions in the qualitative and the quantitative surveys, you need to find out, first of all, what are the scenes? When do they use the product or service today that they have today? How do they use things today? So what are the jobs and tasks that they do? How else could they do those things? So what are the alternative ways of doing those? And what do they think about those alternatives? What are they looking to accomplish? So not just how they use it, but what are they trying to do? So the needs or the practical benefits. And then of those, what is the most important? So getting a priority order is a very important activity in these surveys. Then when they use that product or service, what's their feeling? This gives you the emotional benefits, and for some products that's really, really important, and we'll come back to that later in value. And what problems do they have? What are their pains? And in a perfect future, what would they look to accomplish or do or remove or add? And that's wants or gains. Now that last one is the most difficult one, and you quite often won't get great answers out of that. You have to use the other data to build up a picture of where they could go. One tool that's used both in software and I've used in the automotive world is user stories. In the automotive world we call them hypotheses, but you build up a very simple statement that says, as a user, I want to do something so that I can achieve some benefit. So you might say, for someone watching this video, as a new product owner or product manager, I want to understand how to learn from customers so that I can build better products. So it's a very short statement that doesn't talk about the technology, it doesn't talk about the solution, it talks about what you want to achieve. And you build those, and then you can use those to communicate with the R&D teams, with the sales and marketing teams, to explain what you're trying to do in a very understandable, connective way. It's very important when you do that to also set an acceptance criteria. So what is the situation that says that they've met that need or goal? So there's two sides to a user story. Also, personas are very useful. So also we used to call these target customer profiles. This is an outline of a hypothetical person who represents all of your customers. So it's very, very useful in a company because typically one person will be doing the surveying. All the other people in the company haven't seen that survey, haven't met the customers. You need to be able to communicate who that customer is very easily and quickly. So you build up some kind of generalized profile of a customer. You can have several different ones for different customer groups, but generalized customer. So for example here, maybe the target customer is Maggie, my cat, 60 years old, female, single. She enjoys sleeping, eating, being with a family. She doesn't like dogs, sudden and loud noises, or too much attention. So if we were building something for my cat, that could be the customer profile of my cat. Now, in this case, I've used my actual cat, but it should never actually be one real customer, because one real customer can't represent the whole market. They can't represent all your customer types. It has to be general enough to represent your customer base. And also, there's privacy rules for not using one specific actual person. At the same time, while you're generalizing it, it should be realistic and credible. I remember one target customer who was, some international person who had this very exotic life, and it wasn't credible. It wasn't realistic. So it should have enough detail to be connectable, but not crazy, and general enough that it's not one actual person. You can use all of this data to make positioning graphs, or sometimes they're called perceptual or positioning maps. So you can take two kind of opposite ideas and map them on a graph. And that can show you customer clusters. And customer clusters are very good for identifying those customers who go into those personas, who go into those customer profiles. And maybe you can identify opportunities from those. It's quite good for doing brand positioning or product positioning against competitors. And in the software world, there's a thing called heat maps. So you can look at how a customer uses a website, where their mouse goes to, what part of the screen is what part of the page is on the screen at a certain time, and that shows you what's getting the attention. So this is kind of a direct customer feed. There's lots of good software tools for the IT industry to understand customer interaction. So I hope those were useful for you. In the next video, we're going to talk more about understanding the market and competitors. Thanks.